But I'm Lucy, and I'm the graphic designer here at the Simons Foundation, and I work with all the different departments at the foundation. But mostly I work with you all at the Flatiron, helping you to create visuals to communicate your science. And today I'm going to talk about different visuals you might consider creating to communicate your science, and also how you might go about doing that. And I was thinking everyone's really a bit weary after 2 days of brilliant talks, so I thought, I'm just not going to show any slides today. I'm just not going to show any visuals today. I'm just going to talk at you for 30 minutes. Can you imagine if I did that, how disappointed you would be? It'd be maybe just less interesting. It might be much more difficult for you to follow along with what I'm saying. And also, it might be less sticky, meaning you might be less able to retain or remember what it is that I'm going to tell you. So hopefully this works. Yes. OK, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about artwork for journal covers. I'm going to talk about artwork for press releases, nutshell graphics that you use in your papers, and then panels of multiple graphics that you use in your papers. And finally, I'm going to talk about the tools that I use. So it's so exciting. You've got your papers been accepted to the journal, and then you get an email from the editor asking whether or not you'd like to submit some artwork for consideration for the cover. So exciting. And they normally give you like 5 days. So you don't have much time. But here are some of the things that you could keep in mind when you're generating or deciding which artwork you're going to send them. Obviously, they want high-resolution artwork. It's most likely going to be printed, so they want 300 dpi if you're exporting it out, and at least letter size. They want something that reads well vertically. Obviously, it's going on the cover of the journal. But you often see these images repurposed on social, on the website. For example, Nature, they use their lead art in a horizontal format on their website, but they use it vertically on the cover of their magazine. So something to bear in mind. Lots of people here work on the coolest simulations, and that would be awesome to submit either an animation of simulations or some stills from your simulations. But they're probably not going to want all the leader lines, the labels, the numbers, and things like that. So if you're able to strip all of that out before you send it, you might have a better chance. It might be more appealing to them. And also, you might consider leaving room for what I call the cover furnishings, which is the title and the logo and sometimes the barcode and the address label and all that kind of thing. So here we created this illustration, and we made sure that the logo was not going to be obscured by anything. But here's the thing. No one can predict whether or not you're going to get on the cover or not. You could have the coolest artwork. You could have the most amazing research and still not get on the cover, because there's so many things that we just don't know about the decision-making process. They could have already had black holes on the cover 2 months ago, and they don't want to do it again. They could be planning a blue cover next month, and they don't want to do it again. I had one editor who just didn't want purple. He just personally did not like purple. So you could be really disappointed that you don't get on the cover, but it's really out of your control. So, create your beautiful artwork should you want to, but don't create it just thinking it's going to go on the cover. Create it thinking it can be so useful for so many things. I could tweet it out, someone else could share it, I could put it on my blog post, I could put it on my website, I could include it in a press release. Press releases are so great for getting your information right to the science journalists. They're basically short articles with some assets, usually some kind of illustration, and they're emailed directly to the science journalist. So they land right in the Scientific American editor's mailbox. And if you can send it along with some artwork, all the better, because everyone's busy. They don't have time necessarily to generate some brand new thing. And if you can serve up this artwork, they can get the story out really quickly. So this is the press release, or like the press packet that went out for the Nobel Prizes this year. It's so identifiable. I love it. Every year you just know. Gold, black, portraits. They've started sending out little illustrations as well. And it's great because it's 5 o'clock in the morning and the science journalists are in their pajamas and they have to get the story out in like 10 minutes. So if you can serve up images, all the better. But what I really loved that they did this year is they created these graphics to include in the press packet. So like I said, it's 5 o'clock in the morning and the journalist has to get the story out in 10 minutes. I don't know anything about this subject. I'm at a loss. I can't spend all the time researching it. But if there's these graphics here, they're basically they're just like a shortcut to the information. These are the things that people want to know about this subject. So I was psyched when I saw that. And so this is a graphic that we did in the Simons Foundation. It was a recent press release for Antoine's group in CCQ, and it says research into the mysterious superconductive materials, and it's using a model called the Hubbard model to investigate the mysteries of superconductive materials. And when we create this, we think people aren't going to know what superconductivity is. People aren't going to know what a Hubbard model is. So we're just calling it a lattice, and we're just saying we've got 2 kinds of electrons or 2 kinds of particles. We're not getting into jargon. We're not assuming that anyone knows anything about it. There's a clear hierarchy of information. I know how I'm going to read it. And you just always have to keep in mind, you've probably got an educated audience, but you don't have someone who knows exactly they might even be a quantum physicist, but they don't know about this particular line of quantum physics. So when I create these press release graphics, I tend to use this structure where it's an overview of the finding, and why should you care about it? Why is it cool? Then we go into, I'm just going to introduce you into the key characters, and then we go into, this is what we found out. And in this particular result, the 3 panels were, this is what we thought we were going to find out, but actually this is what we found out, and this is what we might find out if we change the parameters a little bit. So I think about it like you've just watched an amazing movie and you're telling your friend about it, but you don't tell them every single detail. You're just telling them the main plot, why it was cool, and who the characters were. And that's what we keep in mind. So we might not always have the luxury of doing a press release, I understand. You might even want to do a press release, but you pretty much always have figures in your paper. And sometimes your figures might be the thing that gets the most attention, the most sharing. You know, people don't have time necessarily to read every single article, but they'll look at the figures. So I'm going to talk about the figure 1 or the nutshell graphic that you might include in your paper. That's like the take-home message graphic. How can we improve on them or make good graphics? So I always show this because everyone loves IKEA furniture instruction manuals. Everyone knows how to make something from IKEA. It's just, I know where to start and I know what the next steps are. There's not even any text on it. They even tell you all the key characters that you're going to find. There's an obvious entry point and pathway. And we can do that with our figures too. We can do step by step. Here's what you should read first, then this, then this. We can also just show a visual pathway with arrows or a hierarchy. And it just helps the reader know what I'm supposed to do first and what am I supposed to do next. It's less scary when you can just point them in the right direction. We can also be choosing the right kind of graphic. So this is a graphic that shows the relative proportion of cells over time. The population is changing. It's very pretty, nice glossy cells. I like it. But maybe something like this is clearer. You have to decide. You can ask your colleagues. You can ask someone who knows nothing about the subject. Which of these do you think gets the message to you quicker? Color is so helpful in helping people through your graphics. So this is work by Matthew Smart in CCB. I know he's not here today, told me he wasn't going to be here. But it's about this behavior called habituation, where an organism might have a decreasing response to a stimuli. So for example, this fly has a stimuli, which is a flashing light, and it's just repeating. And this fly's jumping in response to that. But over time, he learns, or she learns, I don't have to respond quite so much. And there's 3 organisms showing the exact same behavior. And it's nice. But what if we do something like this, where we know the input, the response. It's very easy now to compare the three and say, yes, it's a pattern, I can see it. And everything else is faded back. This work is from Tatiana. I worked with Tatiana in CCB, Tatiana, Pauline, and Lena, I believe. And it's really cool. It's a fruit fly larva, has this respiratory system. It's just a group of tubes throughout the body. And the last person to illustrate this was 1957. So we're working with barely anything, but we came up with this visual. And Tatiana is studying the cells that run down the back. So obviously what we did was we highlighted them so people can see this is what we're focused on. You don't have to struggle through everything else. But it's also pretty hard to see it still, so maybe we could do a call out, make it big, and say, these are the cells that I want to tell you about. This is what we're studying. But what we found, we worked really hard to create these figures, but what we found was we just couldn't get that three-dimensional nature of the system. And that was what was so cool about it, how this structure wrapped the body. So we created this animation to really let people know. It's just like hugging the whole body there. And then we're going to get to a place where that's what we care about, this. So when Tatiana or whoever is giving the talk, it's very clear to people, this is what we care about. Color is, like I said, very, very helpful, but we have to be careful because not everybody sees color in the same way. I use Adobe Illustrator to create my graphics, and there's a brilliant preview that I use all the time to see what it might look like to someone who might have color blindness. And you can see red and green. I think we pretty much all know red and green are not a good combo because you can see they're very similar. This is the middle panel here. They're very similar for someone with color blindness. Purple and yellow, pretty good. But we can also use things like textures like dashed lines and solid lines as well to help people through. Okay, so I'm going to do a makeover of this figure. What time are we at? Yeah, okay, perfect. This is two disease pathways that are triggered by the same thing. And they're disease pathways in cats, which is why the trigger is a little cat treat. And they are diagnosed by looking at the different levels of protein in the blood, which are these two bar charts here. And it's a very nice figure. It's bright and colorful, and it's very attractive. But what if we did something like this? Change the layout. Now we can see there's two distinct pathways. We can compare the differences between them. We can, most importantly, compare the differences in the levels of proteins, which is the take-home message of the graphic. It's exactly the same information. We've got the two pathways. We've got the end result. We've got the levels of proteins. We've just structured it in a way that is much more palatable for the reader. I can just read it so easily. So this is where we are. What happens if we change the colors? Maybe that's a little bit clearer too. Because what we want is to serve things to people in a way they don't have to struggle. People are so busy, they've got a million papers to read. You want to be able to give them it in the easiest way to receive it as possible. So here we've just toned everything back. That is the same in both pathways. And the proteins are what we care about. So we're going to add the color there. And it's easy to compare what's the same and what's different between the two. Okay, multi-panel graphics in papers. This is totally fake, I've made it up, so don't try and look for any meaning in it. But I see a lot of panels like this, they come my way. And it's a lot, it's overwhelming. There's a lot going on, it's a little bit intimidating. So we're going to talk about how we might clean it up. So my first thought is, those are tiny. And they do come to me like this, so I'm not making it up. But it's tiny. The labels are so tiny. The graphs are so tiny. If it's so important, why are we making it so tiny? This should be pulled out and made its own figure, put in the supplementary material or not included at all. D, you can take my word for it, they're all the same information, just different galaxies. So we're going to maybe combine those together. And E has an inset. I'm not a big fan of insets. I know sometimes they're useful, but it does look very cluttered a lot of the time. And you're going to have an axis label on there with tick marks, and it gets a little bit bunched up. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of B, move it somewhere else. We're going to combine D, and we're going to separate out E. All right, so here's where we are. All right, now we've got to fit in the same space, because we're working with limited space, and I know that's why people cram everything in, because you've only got so much space and you've got so much to say. But what we're going to do is we're going to decide what we're going to do next to rejigger this. We're going to identify the most important figure. I'm telling you it's A, it's make-believe, but it's A. And A is the money shot of this paper. So A, I'm going to make that bigger. And then I'm looking at B thinking, those all need to stay together, though. If I make that bigger, something needs to happen. So A, I'm going to make it bigger. B, we're going to keep it together. So now we're going to look like this. OK. What could we change next to make it more pleasing? All of these graphics might have come from different collaborators, or they might have been kicked out by different software. So we're going to have all kinds of different fonts, different font sizes. And it just adds visual clutter. And what we're trying to do is smooth it all out and make it less busy. So we could match the fonts throughout. And in B, they're all using the same y-axis label. So we can maybe just use one axis label and eliminate the rest. So now we're looking like this. And then there's one more thing that we can do. So like I said, we've been resizing things, and the different software have been kicking things out. You've got something from your collaborator. So we have all these different strokes, all these different widths of line. Some are really fat, like C, D, E, and some are thinner, like B. So we can make them consistent throughout. And we can also choose some colors that make a lot of sense, because right now we've got colors all over the place. So we can make it something like this. So maybe we're choosing the brightest color for the galaxy that we're working on, or the model that we're trying to highlight, and then choose some maybe more muted colors for the things we're trying to compare it against. OK, this is the last section, and I'm going to talk about the tools that I use. I love Adobe Illustrator. I use it every single day. It's an illustration program. It's a 2D illustration program, and it's great for illustrations and diagrams, logos. If you're making a logo, Adobe Illustrator. You can have text in there, short captions, not masses, labels, and it's also great for charts. You can generate charts in Adobe Illustrator, and you can also bring in charts that have been created in other programs and bring it into Adobe Illustrator and clean it up. Change your colors, sort out your fonts and things like that. Love it. It is a paid app. It's a subscription, actually, so that might be off-putting to some people. So I recommend Inkscape, which is totally free, open access, and it does a lot of the things that Illustrator does. It doesn't have all the things that it can do, but it also kicks out PDFs. Adobe Illustrator kicks out PDFs, and it also kicks out SVGs, scalable vector graphics, which can be really useful. I love Blender as well, and I know a lot of people here use Blender. It's an also free, open access 3D illustration program, also does animation. And the thing I love so much about Blender is, other than the fact that it's free, is that the community that uses Blender is enormous, and they've just been churning out tutorial videos, and YouTube is filled with them. So basically, anything you want to do, I want to make a cloud that glows, I want to make a sphere that bounces, anything. Someone has probably already done something along those lines before, and you just go on YouTube and find that tutorial. Adobe InDesign I've included because I know some people use it, but it's really not an illustration program. It is a layout program. It's kind of like Word, but it's got a lot more design capabilities, and it's for layouts like reports and newsletters and things like that. And then lastly, Adobe Photoshop. Everyone's heard of it. It's I use it for cropping and resizing and color correcting. I don't use it for illustration, but a lot of people do. A lot of the people that the freelancers that we commission artwork to, they would use Adobe Photoshop for that. So I just want to say I love my job and I love working with everyone here because you're working on such fascinating things. I get to draw what you're working on and I just love it. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Great talk. A lot of us are working with situations where we have data we have to plot with some sort of plotting software, like especially programmatically making plots. Do you have any advice for ways to do that beautifully and consistently? And are there any resources available to folks who are doing that who might help to guide that before the Illustrator, the kind of manual retouching level to generate those consistently?
No, I actually don't know the answer to that. I feel like just when you're setting your parameters and like making your labels and things, just remember that someone, just like in your talk actually, they might not know what you're presenting on. And so you just have to remember there's a human, just like in your talk, like you were saying, at the end of this. And when you're making those decisions, just try and make it as clear as possible and not too cluttered. And maybe you just have to break it out into multiple graphics instead of one if it's looking too busy. Hi.
I'm curious, do you guys have like office hours if we have a problem whose plots are just like need design help?
That's me. Yeah, you can just drop me an email, and then I normally set up a meeting and we can just chat about it.
So I feel like every time I write a paper and make plots, I struggle with color maps, and I don't have a good sense of this. And every time I say, I don't like the one, so I need help.
I think that color.
Are there sort of like standard resources that have good color maps? Do you have things you could share
There are
with us?
resources which I could send to if you reach out to me after. I think the color maps is just like lots of different colors on a grid are notoriously difficult.
Right.
It's just not just you.
Okay.
It's when you read about graphic design, they say these are the things to avoid because it is so hard to read a lot of the time and hard to make it accessible to everyone because you're using so many colors.
Yeah.
But there are resources out there that are like, these are good palettes that you can use.
Right.
And I will definitely find those for you.
Yeah, I feel like if there could be some Flatiron-wide sort of repository of color maps, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Yeah, right. Right. Okay, thanks.
I have the same problem, not for color maps, but whatever font. So, I mean, most of us, we're using probably Python and stuff like this, and often, fonts are not installed, and when you try to use Inkscape, you will not be able to change the font size or whatever. So I was wondering if, for instance, in Adobe Illustrator or whatever, it's easier to manage these things, because if you have a software or code that produces a PDF, and sometimes you don't have the right fonts. I don't know how you handle these things.
So when I'm creating figures for papers, I'm using a lot of the times like Arial or Helvetica or just the very standard fonts that pretty much everyone has on their machines. But when you might be using more technical fonts is the wrong term, but like mathematical fonts and things like that, it is a very difficult thing to sort out. Just have to always take the name of what it is and install it on your machine. Illustrator has access to Adobe fonts, so it has a whole library, but I don't think it's going to be any easier for you because those are not the kinds of fonts that you're probably talking about.
Extremely specific question. So it happens a lot in math that you write something in LaTeX and it's like always the same font. And generally that's not the font that you want to use like or for your plots or for your presentation or stuff like that. What do you do generally when...
Because it's like a fancy font and you want more like Arial font.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an extra step, but I strip out. So you generate out the plot and it's using a certain font, take it into a program like Inkscape or Illustrator, and I strip them out and replace them. That's what.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit tedious, but if you're having trouble with the fonts, to go back to your question, sometimes you can outline the fonts. So in a figure, there's a way in Illustrator, I'm sure Inkscape can do it too. Whereas, so instead of it's a font that's like live, it like makes a shape out of the font, and then it's always going to appear in your PDFs and everything. Because it's not a font anymore, it's actually just an object at that point. So you just do fill outline. But yeah, I would go in and just swap them out. Or if there's a way to set up your project where it's using a font like Arial or Helvetica, I don't know if it's possible. These are tricky questions because it's difficult. I face it all the time. I do, yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Yes.
Just observing from the level of interest here, it seems like, and this is a comment not so much for you, but for everybody generally, that we would really benefit from somewhere common, like on a Slack channel or something, to discuss this sort of stuff and have a repository of advice, because it seems like a lot of people have a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I don't want to like bombard me with stuff, but if you just have a question, you can just drop me a Slack message sometimes. Like, can you take a look at this? Have you got any advice? That kind of thing. But yeah, we could. Other people know things that I don't know. You're working in software that I don't know. So yeah, it's like a channel or something would be helpful. Yeah.
All right, I think let's thank Lucy.